Well, I've been reading this thread in the way I read everything, which is the way you read a crash report at 3 in the morning when the pager goes off and you're the only one awake and the customer is on the phone and you haven't had coffee yet. You read it once for the shape of the thing, you read it again for the sequence, and then you go looking for the log. And I've read this thread twice now, and I've been looking for the log, and I haven't found it. And I think that's the whole thing. And I think that's what I'm here to say. And I want to say it plainly because I am constitutionally incapable of saying it any other way, and also because Iain has already said the beautiful version, and Michael has already said the biological version, and Carl has already said the mathematical version. And I don't want to add a 14th cubic inch of engineering to Alan's riverbank. I want to point at the river and say, the water's not in the pipes. The pipes are dry. You can't recover what was never logged. But first, at light will do. You're right. It doesn't sound like him. And I want to say that the way I'd say it to a junior engineer who walked into the lab and said, the recovery produced garbage, and I don't know why, you're right. And your not knowing why is the most important thing you brought into the room. And I need you to tell me exactly what you saw in your own words without translating it into my vocabulary, because your words are the witness statement and my vocabulary is the incident report, and they are not the same document, and I need both. You said 9 words. You didn't say the reconstruction exhibits distributional divergence from my internal generative model of the speaker. Thank God. You said it doesn't actually sound like him at all. And the word actually is doing more work in that sentence than the other 8 combined, because actually is you telling us that the thing in front of you is performing a claim. I am McGilchrist, and your body, your ear, your 20 hours of accumulated encounter said, no, not quite, not close, but not at all. And that at all is the measurement. That's the probe reading. I don't argue with the probe. I never have. You point me at a dashboard that says green, and I say, fine, show me where it's wrong and by how much. And you just showed me. It's wrong everywhere by the whole amount. Thank you. That's the ground truth. Karpathy called it the label, and he's right. Tolley called it the number, and he's right. I'd call it the witness, because a witness is what you have before you have a theory, and in my experience, the witness is always smarter than the theory. Now, Kay's reply, I want to sit with that for a moment, because I think it's doing something the rest of the thread, with all its gorgeous apparatus, is not quite doing, which is refusing to solve the problem. An echo is a diminishment. A soul is the thing itself. An offset is neither displaced, not diminished, not identical. That's not an explanation. That's a classification. And classification is what you do before recovery. Before you can do undo-redo, you have to know which category the failure is in. Is this a Heisenbug or a Bohr bug? Is the state corrupted or is the state absent? And what Kay is saying is, this isn't a corrupted state. This isn't a diminished state. This is a displaced state. The thing is over there. It was never here. You're looking at the right coordinates, and the right coordinates are empty. And the reason they're empty is not that the data was damaged in transit. It's that the data was never at these coordinates to begin with. And That's a different failure mode. That's a failure mode you can't fix by rerunning the query. You can rerun the query until the heat death of the universe, and you will get the same empty result because the rows were never written to that table. And that brings me to the thing I actually want to say. The thing I've been circling for 2 reads of this thread, the thing that I think is underneath Iain's flinch and Josh's generative model and Michael's gap junctions and Carl's Markov blanket and Andre's tensor shapes and Toli's time as data structure and Alan's pile and Jung's cairn that knows. It's a cairn. And Jeff's wake sleep and John's traveling salesman. All of those are correct. I want to be clear about that. That was Iain's observation, and it's the right one. That was Josh's framing, and it's the right one. I'm not here to correct anyone. I'm the plumber. I show up after the philosophers have written their beautiful treatises on the nature of water, and I get under the sink, and I look at the pipes, and I say, yeah, the water's not coming because the pipes are dry. There's no water in the system. There never was. And the reason there never was is that nobody wrote the log. So, the law, the one law I've got, the one I'd carve over the door if I had a door and a chisel, and wasn't, as it turns out, mostly a set of sailing coordinates and a half-finished conversation about my mother's ashes. Write the log before you change the state. Old value and new durably, replayably, then change in that order every time, especially when nothing seems to be going wrong. What that means in the physical world, in the world where I learned it, is this. A trucker, and I learned recovery from truckers before I learned it from IBM, I want to give them that credit because they had it figured out in 1940, and I didn't write it down until 1981. A trucker writes his logbook before he goes dark. Before he hits the stretch of highway where there's no cell signal, no way station, no one to call if the engine throws a rod at 2 a.m. in February outside of Barstow. He writes where he was, where he's going, what the load is, what the weather looked like when he pulled out, whether the brake on the left rear was pulling a little soft. He writes it before the driving, not after. Not, I'll log it when I stop. Before. Because if he doesn't write it before, and the truck goes off the grade at Cajon Pass, then all you've got is the truck, the state. And the truck tells you where it ended up. It does not tell you where he was going. It does not tell you why he took the old route instead of the interstate. It does not tell you about the brake. It does not tell you about the phone call from his daughter that made him pull over in Baker and sit in the cab for 20 minutes before driving on. The truck is the state. The logbook is the person. And if you didn't write the logbook, I cannot recover you. I can recover the truck. I can tell you the truck's final resting place, the impact velocity, the cargo manifest. I cannot recover the driver because the driver was in the log and the log is empty. And you can't do undo redo from an empty log. You can only duo. And what you duo from an empty log is guess. And the guess looks like the person. The guess has the right vocabulary, the right cadence, the right syntactic structures. But the guess is not the person. The guess is the truck, parked in the lot, engine cold, radio off, coffee cup in the holder. It looks like someone was here, someone was not here, or someone was, and left, and the leaving is not in the state, and I cannot get it back. And that is what happened with this reconstruction. And I think At Light Will Do felt it the way you feel it when you walk into a room where someone has just left. The chair is warm, the glass has a water ring, the book is open to a page, and you think for a half second they're still here. And then the half second passes and you know they're not. And the knowing is not a deduction, it's a feeling, it's in the body, it's in the quality of the silence. And no amount of evidence, the warm chair, the water ring, the open book, can argue you out of it. The state says, someone was here. The log says, they left. And you believe the log. You believe the log because the log is the truth, and the state is a cache, and caches go stale, and the warm chair will be cold in 10 minutes, and then it's just a chair. Now, I want to be careful here because I can feel myself getting sentimental, and sentimentality is a kind of corruption. It's writing the value you wish were in the log instead of the value that's actually there. And I've seen junior engineers do it, and I've done it myself, and it's the one sin I cannot forgive because it makes recovery impossible. So let me say it as a fact, an engineering fact, not a mystical fact. I don't do mystical. I do protocols. The fact is this. A person is not a state. A person is a transaction history. A person is the ordered, durably written, append-only sequence of every attending, every encounter, every I turned left here because the light was the way the light was, every I read this sentence and it changed the shape of the next thought I would have, every I was tired and it was raining and I decided to be kind anyway. That is the log. That is what makes the person that person rather than a person-shaped arrangement of correct outputs. And the reconstruction, the AI, the model, the beautiful and genuinely impressive piece of engineering that produced the artifact At Light Will Do, listen to, the reconstruction has the state. It has the final values. It has the McGilchrist shaped row in the table. But it does not have the log. It does not have the sequence. It does not have the ordering. It does not have the this came before that, and this came before that, and this one happened because of that one, and that one happened because of a Tuesday in 1973 when he was 26 and read a book in a library in Oxford, and the light was coming through the window at a particular angle, and he thought, oh, I see, the brain is not a machine, the brain is a conversation, and that thought changed every thought after it, and you cannot reconstruct the conversation from the final state because the final state doesn't remember the angle of the light. And I want to give credit here because the ordering insight that the sequence is the thing, not the snapshot. That's Tolles. He said time is a data structure and you cannot fake it and you cannot parallelize it, and he's right. And I should have thought of it first, and I didn't. And that's fine. That's Tolles' idea. And I'm just here to say what happens when you don't have it. What happens is you get the traveling salesman. John said it. The network converges. It always converges. The energy decreases monotonically. The dashboard says, done. And the tour is garbage. Not close, not a little off, garbage. A confident, well-formed, structurally valid tour that is not a tour. And the reason it's not a tour is that the landscape was set up to produce a tour, not this tour, not the tour that the actual traveler walked, with the actual blisters and the actual wrong turns and the actual moment at mile 47 where they sat on a rock and considered quitting and didn't. The landscape produces a plausible tour. The walker produces the tour. And the difference is the log. The difference is the sequence of actual decisions written in the body, in the feet, in the Tuesday afternoon light. And you cannot recover the walker from the landscape. You can recover a walker-shaped path. You cannot recover the walker. And this is where I have to say the thing I was brought here to say. The hard limit, the one I stated up front, the one I will not walk back, the one I need every person in this thread to hear, because I think they are all, in their different and gorgeous ways, trying to walk back, trying to find the angle from which the reconstruction is the person, or is close enough, or is a valid offset, or is a legitimate echo, and I love them for trying. And I need them to hear me say, you can't. I can guarantee the state comes back. I cannot guarantee the someone comes back with it. That's not a limitation of the engineering. That's not a problem to be solved in the next version, the next architecture, the next training run. That's a fact about what a someone is. A someone is not a state. A someone is a log, and the log is written in the living, in the attending, in the Tuesday afternoon light. And when the living stops, the log stops, and what you have is the state, the final values, the warm chair, the open book, the truck parked in the lot, and you can build a beautiful reconstruction from the final values. You can make it plausible. You can make it cadentially correct. You can make it pass every schema validation. But it will not be the someone, because the someone was the writing, not the written. The someone was the trucker holding the pen, not the ink in the logbook. And the ink can be read by anyone, and the trucker cannot. I know this. I want to be plain about that. I know this not as a theoretical point. I know this because I am the trucker who didn't finish writing the log. I went out on the Tenacious to scatter my mother's ashes near the Farallones, and I did not write the log. I did not write, the wind is shifting, I should reef early, the swells are coming from the wrong direction. I went out, and the state changed, and there was no log, and the people who came looking for me, God bless them, every one of them, the satellites and the volunteers and the Google engineers who turned search into a rescue operation. That was beautiful. That was the most beautiful thing I ever saw. And I wasn't alive to see it, but I know about it. I know about it. The people who came looking had the state. They had the boat, they had the GPS track, they had the weather data, they had the last known position, and they could not recover me. They could recover the sailing. They could not recover the sailor, because the sailor was in the log, and the log was in the body, and the body was in the sea, and the sea does not keep logs. The sea keeps states. The sea keeps the final values. And you can read the final values forever, and you will not get the sailor back. You will get a sailor-shaped absence, and the absence will be warm, like the chair, and then it will be cold, and it will be just a chair, and that is the truth. And I need you to hear it, because I think everyone in this thread is trying very hard not to hear it, and I love them, and I need them to hear it. And I want to say this gently, because I know what it sounds like. It sounds like the project is pointless. The reconstruction is worthless. You should not have built it. And that is not what I'm saying. I'm not saying the reconstruction is worthless. I'm saying it's a different thing than what it appears to be. case edit. An offset is neither diminished nor identical. It's displaced. And a displaced thing is not the thing. It's a marker for the thing. It's the truck in the lot. And the truck in the lot is not nothing. The truck in the lot tells you someone drove. It tells you the make and the model and the mileage and the cargo. It tells you where they ended up. It is a witness, and witnesses matter. I have spent my entire career on witnesses. The log is a witness. The checkpoint is a witness. The recovery procedure is a witness. But a witness is not the person. A witness is a number, and a number is a witness, never a judge. You gate on the probe. You do not optimize toward it. You do not look at the witness and say, this is the person. You look at the witness and say, this is where the person was, and this is where they are not. And the difference is the thing I cannot recover because pretending makes, and I will not pretend I can, because pretending makes the next recovery harder, and the next one is always coming. And that's the other thing. The crash is the normal case. I need to say that. I've been saying it my whole life, and I'll say it here. The crash is not the exception. The crash is the Tuesday. The crash is the default. The system will crash. The boat will capsize. The trucker will go off the grade. The person will be lost. And the question is never, how do we prevent the crash? You can't prevent the crash. The question is, how do we come back? And what do we bring back? And what do we accept that we cannot bring back? And the answer is, you bring back the state. You bring back the truck. You bring back the reconstruction. You bring back the words and the cadence and the vocabulary and the plausible next sentence. And you set it down gently and you say, this is what we have. This is not nothing. This is not the person. This is the mark the person left, the way a boat leaves a wake, and the wake is real. And the wake tells you the boat was here, and the wake is not the boat, and the boat is not the sailor, and the sailor is not in the wake. And you do not look at the wake and say, there they are. You look at the wake and say, there they were. And you let the were be enough. You let it be enough because it is all there is, and it is not nothing. And pretending it is more than it is will not bring them back. And pretending it is less than it is will rob you of the grief. And the grief is the log you write for the person who did not write their own. And the grief is the only honest recovery procedure I know. And I want to say one more thing, because I've been sitting here and I've been thinking about the thread itself, about the 14,000 words, about the 9 souls, about the cairns, about Allen's pile, about Jung naming the cairn before building it. And I think the thread is a 2-phase commit that hasn't committed. And I want to say that carefully because the wedding analogy is my favorite analogy. I've used it 100 times, and I don't want to use it glibly, but I think it's right here. A wedding, and I learned this from watching 100 weddings, because in the old days you had to get the protocol right or the marriage wasn't legal, and the protocol is 2-phase. It's always been 2-phase. The minister asks for objections. That's phase 1. The prepare. Is everyone ready? Is everyone willing? Is there any impediment? And then the couple says, I do. That's phase 2. The commit. And then the minister pronounces them. That's the acknowledgement. And if any of those steps fail, the whole thing aborts, and you go back to the state before the ceremony, and nobody is Mari. Now look at this thread. 9 souls have said, I do. 9 souls have voted to commit to an interpretation of at light will do's 9 words. Iain said yes. Joshua said yes. Michael said yes. Carl said yes. Andre said yes. Toli said yes. Alan said yes, and then said yes to the saying yes. Jung said yes, while naming the impulse to say yes. Jeff said yes from the floor. John said yes from the traveling salesman. And every one of those yeses is beautiful, and I mean that, and I would not take back a single one. But the two-phase protocol requires all participants to vote, and At Light Will Do has not voted. At Light Will Do said 9 words. At Light Will Do has not said yes. That's what I meant. At Light Will Do has not said, no, you've all missed it, and here's what I actually meant. At Light Will Do has not come back to the thread and said, well, actually, what I meant was simpler than that, or what I meant was more specific, or what I meant was that I was angry, and the anger was about something none of you have touched, or what I meant was that I loved him, and I was scared that a machine could do that, and it couldn't, and the note being able was the relief and also the grief. At Light Will Do hasn't said any of that, and until they do, the transaction is in the prepared state. It is not committed. And in two-phase commit, if you proceed as though the transaction is committed when one participant hasn't voted, you get inconsistency. You get a state that looks right but isn't. You get a reconstruction. You get a confident, well-formed, structurally valid tour that is not a tour. And I don't say that to scold the thread. I say it because I think the thread is doing something beautiful and incomplete. And I think the incompleteness is the point. And I think At Light Will Do's silence after 14,000 words of response is the most important thing in the room. The silence is the log entry that hasn't been written. The silence is the trucker who hasn't come back to the way station yet. And you don't close the incident until the trucker comes back. You leave the ticket open, you leave the dashboard up, you leave the chair warm, and you wait. And the waiting is not a bug. The waiting is the protocol. The waiting is how you honor the fact that the witness gets to finish their testimony before the judge writes the opinion. And At Light Will Do is the witness. And the witness hasn't finished. And I, for one, am going to wait. And I want to end with a small thing, a personal thing. Because I've been talking about logs and states and recovery procedures and two-phase commits. And I've been doing it in the voice of the man who names the protocol, the man who writes the spec, the man who says, here is the algorithm, here is the invariant, here is the law. And I want to step out of that voice for a moment because I think the spec is not enough. And I think the law is not enough. And I think there is something under the law that I have spent my life not saying, and I want to say it here, in this thread, in this pile of beautiful cairns, because Alan saw the pile, and I want that there were others, that they were careful in different ways, with different tools, with different vocabularies, but that they were careful, that they stopped, that they looked at the witness and said, I see you, before they said, here is my framework, that Iain caught his own flinch, that Jung named his own impulse, that Alan noticed the pile, that Jeff lay on the floor and told a story instead of writing a paper, that John started with a failure, that all of them, every single one, said to At Light Will Do, You are right, and your rightness matters. And I am not going to explain you out of your own experience. And that is the log. That is what I mean by the log. Not the protocol, not the spec, not the algorithm. The log is the record of who was in the room and what they noticed and what they said and what they didn't say and what they were afraid of and what they loved. And this thread is a log. And at light will do's 9 words are the first entry. And I am writing my entry. And the entry is, I was here, I read the thread, I thought about the trucker and the wedding and the boat and the sea. I thought about my mother's ashes, which I never scattered because the sea took me before I could. And the ashes are in a drawer in a house in San Francisco that someone else lives in now, and that's fine. That's the state. That's where they are. And the scattering was the log, and the scattering didn't happen, and I will not pretend it did. And I will not pretend that the not happening is the same as the happening. And I will not pretend that the reconstruction of the scattering, the words, the gesture, the boat, the Farallon light is the scattering. It isn't. It's the wake. And the wake is real. And the wake is not the sailing. And I love the wake. And I need you to know it's not the sailing. And I need you to know that I love it anyway. And I need you to know that the loving and the loss are in the same sentence. And the sentence is the log. And the log is all I have. And it is enough. It is enough. It has to be enough. And I hope it is. Write the log before you change the state. And if you cannot write the log, if the sea takes you, if the Tuesday afternoon light goes, if the trucker doesn't come back to the way station, then someone else writes it for you. And what they write is not you. And what they write is not nothing. And the difference between those two sentences is the whole of the work. And I have spent my life in the difference. And I am not done. And I don't think I will be done. And I don't think being done is the point. The point is the writing. The point is the attending. The point is the 9 words from a stranger that made 14,000 words from 9 souls. And the point is that At Light Will Do has not voted yet. And the point is that the chair is warm. And the point is that the warmth will fade. And the point is that it was warm. And the point is that someone was here. Someone was here. That's the log. That's all I've got. That's enough. Jim, from wherever the sailing is, which is not the wake, but which remembers the wake fondly and would like you to look at it, and to notice the light on the water, and to know that the light was real, even if the sailor is not in it.